button. You can click that, and this is your free press pass. I urge you all to take cutouts from our Hangouts and post them as your own. Please do not mix them to make them sound like we're saying things we are not. But other than that, you can use the content produced during these Hangouts to promote BitShares and yourself. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome everyone to another BitShares Open Source Agenda Hangout. Today is Friday, August 11th, 2017, and this is Hangout number 33. We are joined as always by a little crew of BitShares nerds in the space who are interested in the technology and where it can bring us with respect to tools that can kind of jettison us beyond Bitcoin and into a world where blockchain technology is used for good all over the place. So with that said, we do start here every week with an RSVP where everybody is allowed to join up and give either a worker proposal, which is one very big one that we like to focus on these days since BitShares has $100+ million for worker proposals and for work on the chain. And we are able to potentially upvote workers and pay people who would like to work for the blockchain. So if you join these Hangouts, you RSVP, and you post a worker, there's a better chance that you will be seen and noticed by the rest of the community who does vote. So consider joining steemit.com, looking for our BitShares Hangout open source agenda posts, and post there. Now, with that said, if you do not have a worker, but you believe that there's something very important within the BitShares ecosystem, we invite you to join up in RSVP as well, because the topics that you bring up may bring into the discussion interesting input that we may not have otherwise thought about. So please consider joining up, participating in this community, and becoming a little mini BitShares expert yourself. With that said, we have a couple things that we're going to cover today, but first I would like to start, as we're going to always start, when Steam Power posts the BitShares weekly State of the Network report. I am going to give us a quick update on some of the things that are going on that he is posting about within that report. So I'll give a real quick review of that, and then we'll get into the agenda for today. This is Steam Power's extract from the BitShares State of the Network report. Bullet number 1. Bill Butler has released a new worker proposal for shareholder consideration. The worker proposal, named 2017-08-BitShares UI, for a total of $150,000 USD for 3 positions lasting for 6-month period, focusing on improvements to the BitShares user interface. Thank you, Bill Butler, for producing that and posting it. And you can always listen as a listener to Bill Butler talking about it at our last Hangout. Next would be Xerox has migrated the documentation sources for docs.bitshares.org to the official BitShares GitHub repo. This is a move toward open access in hopes that the community and leading projects will work toward extension and improvement of those resources. Next is Jademont has introduced 2 new web wallets launched from teams in China, Hello BTS, maintained by the team from YaoYao, and 1001 ICO. Both wallets have built from the base BitShares reference client and have a focus on ICOs. Next in line is Cobb has announced a snapshot for the Muse network that will occur between August 9th and August 11th. Ronnie Bozing has said, due to large amount of users clearly have not managed to move their Open Muse to their own native Open Ledger wallet, will make it possible to have Muse in its new form when available to taking. Now, let me read this part again. I'll cut it off. Cobb has announced a new snapshot for the Muse network that will occur between August 9th at 00:001 UTC to August 11th, 23:59:59 UTC. Ronnie Bosing said that due to large amount of users clearly have not managed to move their Open Muse to their own native wallet, OpenLedger will make sure it is possible to have the Muse in its new form when available, taking a snapshot for the user base and their holdings at the snapshot of the Muse's announcement to begin. So basically, with this one, I'll just summarize it for those who are going to have a little bit difficult time understanding that. If you have Open Muse, you are safe. You will be given the new Muse in the BitShares wallet whenever the snapshot has been taken place. You will not lose anything. Open Muse is an acceptable snapshot target that you will receive from. Next is going to be BitSpark will be switching to the BitShares blockchain from Bitcoin because it is better suited for the company's business. As things stand currently, BitShares offers the greatest benefits to a remittance company looking to utilize cryptocurrency to send money quicker, cheaper, into more locations. BitSpark will be aiming for 180 plus currencies, instant payments, no cost, and zero counterparty risk. So we can kind of see why they were probably looking at BitShares. Now, with that said, on the agenda for today, we have Alex P. Morris, who wants to bring up the topic that he brought up via a Steemit article: beware crossing the offer with your bid on the BitShares DEX. You may overpay and or buy greater size than you expect. He also has posted a GitHub BitShares core issue 342, rounding issue when matching orders, and he is trying to get this fixed. So how he says it is improving BitShares. If you buy one at 100 by accident, when there is one at 10, should you buy it one at 10 or should you buy 10 at 10 as it currently works? As it now stands, you are likely to receive some odd combination of rounded size and or price. So what he's saying is that if you go to buy something one at 100 by accident, it'll actually take all 100 of those tokens. It will line it up with the highest price below 100, and it will fill that order up to the actual 100 price. Instead of just saying you want one at 100 or below, it's saying you want one at 100 or as many as I can get for 100. I hope that makes sense and clears this up a little bit. Next will be Talkinator talking about the voting in the BitShares Depots ecosystem. There are a few questions that he placed here. What can stakeholders vote on? How can stakeholders vote? And how much weight is given to a stakeholder's vote? How much weight is given to a block producer? And he also has posted another post regarding the GUI worker proposal that is still up for a vote, and he has posted the proposal in English and Mandarin, followed by a little bit of talk about the documentation on BitShares, which is another thing that Talkinator has brought up regarding audiences and financing. And then if we can end the day with the following, I would like to talk about the idea myself that I brought up of potentially leveraging the BitShares worker pool, which has substantial funding, to potentially get projects or cryptographically secured token projects into the BitShares ecosystem and potentially buy into them for BitShares in return for share drops on BitShares itself if certain funding and other requirements are met. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Alex P. Morris's. Alex, are you available to talk today?
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing, Fuzzy?
I'm so glad to see you here, man. I'm glad to
I don't know if I'm
see
so
your
glad
face
to be
posted
here.
here.
It never feels like enough time. I've even been rushing to just throw my stuff up on GitHub, but this one's been a doozy, I'll tell you. It's
So,
like a
do you have
rabbit
any
hole I wish I
update?
hadn't taken on almost.
Yeah, I'm sure, and it doesn't necessarily make everybody want to respond always in the best ways or the most patient ways, I guess. So it is very interesting to see that you've brought this up, and I think it's something that we should acknowledge as well. But that's of course my personal opinion, and we have a huge number of people who have lots of stake in the BitShares ecosystem. So I am one of many. However, you did post and you got 9 votes, and you're up there at the top. So I would love if you could kind of summarize it real quick for everybody. Tell everybody what you've done with the GitHub BitShares core issue 342, and maybe open it up to any community questions.
Sure. It's actually it was A-Bit that opened up that new issue, and then we've sort of been taking it from there. And I'll tell you, I mean, it's just been sort of a little pitfall and gotcha every step of the way for anyone who's been following it. But I'm sure everyone's aware of the problem at this point, more or less, and it's I think good that more people are aware of it until some sort of a fix is put in. That said, it's really strange because like from the testing, it looked like I sort of hit on a possible solution. And A-Bit and PM were sort of hitting on an inversion issue that I just wasn't seeing in the testing right away when I was putting the orders in. I had set it up. It's tricky to use Open Ledger because you have to change the Genesis key. So I was entering orders into the client wallet, and everything actually looked like it was matching up pretty much correctly. And I had posted that in the GitHub issue; people could see it, but they. PM especially kept bringing up, well, it seems like there would still be an inversion issue if you go below 1 or above 1. And part of that's related to the fact that you can flip either side on a bid can become an offer can become a bid. And that's really where the underlying issue is, which I think is part of the reason why this has just never been solved in such a long time. Because as A-Bit said, there's always a sell operation, but no one ever really created a buy operation. So how do you really solve that? And while like my solution sort of hit it, there was still an issue when you inverted and suddenly the book would go below 1 versus above 1. I'm just going to throw it back to you just to make sure I haven't lost everyone, Fuzzy.
I think that you're touching upon a complex issue, so you haven't lost anybody, but I think digging into it a little bit more is not a bad idea.
Okay, I just don't want to. I'll try and talk at a lower level because I know. I mean, it's not even to sound arrogant or anything. This thing's had my head twisting every which way myself. As you know, I'm sure a few of my PMs have been clients, so I completely understand how this. Each time you think you sort of got it, then it's like something else hits you on the head from another angle and says, "Well, how have I been missing that?" And I was throwing another thing too, especially with what's been going on in the ecosystem. It's a lot nicer, and you see a more productive. Even though this sort of got off on the wrong foot, but the way it's sort of resolving, you see how much more efficient it can be and effective when people actually start trying to work together, as opposed to being at each other's throats. And in the end, if you do come up with a good solution, you might not always do so, but it works out a lot better. And then in the end, if it works out well, at least you might be a little closer to finding something in a good way versus just being at each other's throats and creating a lot of negative animosity and whatnot. And I'm glad, hopefully, this however it resolves itself might be somewhat of an example of that. So I'll just throw that in. But the new idea that I had, and this still needs to be proved out, but to sort of solve this inversion issue, I kind of came up with an interesting potential solution where the expiration is not really used that often. And you see, it's sort of a tricky thing because you don't want to just like if Abit's talking about adding a whole new buy operation. Well, that's really overwhelming, and by the time you get through all the politics of that and the work involved, it's just, you know, is there an easier way to get the information we need? So I kept looking at all the object, and you know, you can't mess with this because it's on the blockchain. So your hands are tied in a lot of issues, and that's what's made it so tricky. But what I sort of came up with, and I have half of it up on my GitHub as a fork of BitShares. I'm not sure if that's the best way I should have done it either, but I'm just taking this a step at a time. But what I tried to do is make it where if someone can actually designate if their order is above 1 or below 1 and sort of pass that in to the expiration field, which becomes a very like minimally invasive way. It doesn't necessarily break anything, and then it can look if there's that flag and determine basically which side of the market the order is attempting to target, which seems like it addresses the inversion issue and all the test cases I came up with. And granted, we do need more, but it seems to pass as long as my mind has gotten them all. And like I said, I'm still a chance I could have made a slip up somewhere, which is also why I'm presenting this here today, because I think the more eyes on this, if other people see that this is worth fixing, more eyeballs are always better. Because I'm obviously might still be missing something. I only started looking at this code in the last few weeks. Other people might have been looking at it for years, and that insight is invaluable for something like this. And there's certainly, I'm sure, even the way I wrote it out or implemented it, I'm sure there's better ways to even do that. But at least I tried to lay out a sort of a framework and an idea that could be implemented in a way that is, like I said, minimally invasive, but still sort of solves the issue. One other issue is there a chance that this can be gamed? Let's say if someone reverses this flag or leaves it out on purpose, to force the taker still into a rounding off mismatch. That has to be looked in more detail as well. But that's essentially where it stands. It was a really tricky issue the way it was originally designed, and that's the main reason why. So I'll throw it back to you, Fuzzy, and anyone else that might want to bring it up, because if there's any particular question.
So this is the rounding error that you're addressing, not BSIP 18?
Right. Where sometimes you end up paying much more than you expect, but because the way it's working now, it's always trying to pair off, sort of like minimum to receive is kind of the key there. So
okay. Wait a second. I'm catching you now. So this is dealing with the order matching back-end issue that has been finally recognized as a bug, rather than that's working as a designed.
Exactly right. You see, or as some might say, from the angle, right, dress it up the right way, and it's a feature, I suppose.
Yeah, I understand. I just wanted to make sure I was tracking with the problem you were describing, because I wasn't getting enough specifics when I was really focused on what you were saying to understand what the problem is. But I understand exactly which problem you're dealing with now. Yeah, it's kind of tricky, isn't it?
Those are the questions I want. So please bring any that you have. Like I said, the more the better, and it clears it up for myself as well. It's like each question either reconfirms or adds a new question that needs to be explored. So this is a way things should be assessed, as opposed to beating the crap out of each other. I just have to keep throwing that in because of what's been going on, as many of us are aware.
It's interesting. I mean, there's also a user interface rounding error that I think has been brought up too, but this is not directly related to the UI. This is more of the back-end order matching problem, right?
Right, and the way I finally my latest idea does require an adjustment on the UI, but I'll tell you, I'm still a little confused, because if you look at the GitHub issue, I was writing back to Abit and PM like a bunch of examples I entered directly in the client wallet, and they were all matching up exactly the way I would have hoped. But in the end, they were both still right about there being an inversion issue that I kept missing. Now, that's also kind of why I had thrown it up there, because I wanted to see what else I might be missing, and that came up. But I was because
well, is it possible that that the UI is compensating for something that's not quite right in the back end?
That's very possible, and again, that was an area. You know, this is, like I said, this was a rabbit hole that just you know, so many things just weren't doing what I would working in ways that I might expect them to, or you see, the real issue again comes in like just looking at the book gives you certain expectations of the way you think it works, and that's a part of the problem that makes it so tricky to assess. You see, internally, like you're looking at it, you see bids and offers. Internally, it doesn't see it that way. What it does is it sees a taker order or an order on the book that has a base and a quote. The problem is you don't know you know, which side of the book that base or quote is on, and internally the way it seems to compensate for that is by making that rounding adjustment. Like if you pay too high, well, I'll bring it down, give you more of one and less of the other, and hopefully it matches off at some price that's not too strange. But there's no, you see, and I was able to compensate for a lot of those cases, but there was still an issue where if, you know, like if you're buying, you know, let's say on one side of the book and it's at 2.5, you know, but you're paying 10, well, I can account for that, but there was an issue where suddenly, let's say you go to 25 cents versus 50 cents, because at that point, you know, quote and base reverse themselves. But there was actually no way internally to really figure that out. So you actually do need more information coming in on the order itself to give that information. Now, my fear still is that, well, can that be gamed in a way? And like I said, you know, I'm probably talking way over because it's taken me a while to figure this out myself. So I'm going to stop there again, and you know, I guess as people want to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, sometimes you kind of lean with difficult and complex problems like that. You need to sit with it for a while and ruminate on it over a period of time before a solution becomes apparent.
That's basically what I've been doing. Like I would take this a little bit at a time, you know, doing a lot of sleeping on it, and it's like, all right, let me just think about this, let it sit in my head for a while, and you know, how can I address this? Because yeah, there seems, you would think it's a trivial thing to be able to determine, you know, what order someone is trying to place, or at least which, you know, because like in the UI, you see, okay, buy test, sell test, buy core, sell core. But that's a non-trivial determination to make from the blockchain perspective, which because there's nothing that really passes in which side to look at. And I sort of thought at first that, well, okay, the side you're targeting is always going to be the base or the quote, or you know, it's going to be consistent. But
I've got a related.
It's not.
I've got a related question. Are you testing this out, as you alluded to just now, on the testnet, or is this a private testnet that you're working with?
It's all, I have it run. Well, the interesting thing is my latest version of this is trickier to do on the testnet. I was doing my previous iteration on the private testnet, but now I would actually have to change the client wallet just to pass in my flags, so which I haven't gotten to at this point. So it would, you know, need a little more visiting there. But what I did put together is a bunch of tests based on some of the examples that I had kind of worked out there with PM on the issue that was opened, and they all seem to pass. Everything seems to match, whether you're on, you know, above one. So it's like a lot of test orders. Like, what happens if I match multiple orders above, you know, 1 to 1, below 1 to 1, crossing? Does it always look like it's doing what it's supposed to? And are all the tokens where they're supposed to, is in their right place at the end on the total balances?
A lot of test cases to make sure that you've got everything covered. Yeah, I can well appreciate how difficult it is to create a good scenario in testing just to make sure you've covered all the bases when you're not sure yourself if all the bases, especially from a gaming kind of thing where you want to make sure that people can't take advantage of the changes you've made here work as well.
You got it, and that's the thing. And interestingly, all the regular test cases, because of this new way I implemented it now, all the current test cases should actually work fine, because what I did was I sort of spun it off as a new way to to fill. So if you don't have these above one flags in there, the current behavior will stand. If it does find those flags, it will sort of siphon off to a new method that I created, which is basically fill order rounded. And all it actually does is it just adds one more field, because even that became a little tricky, because there's certain cases where you have to refund refund some of the overpay to the taker. And that's all it's really doing. It's just it just includes a parameter to allow for that to accept that a refund field. So I try to leave a lot of extra debugging code in there, just for if other people want to try and follow it. But you hit it on the nail. I mean, like I said, it's a rabbit hole that I almost wish I had, started, because it was a trickier one, and you figure, yeah, people have been bringing this up in various ways for years, and there must be a reason why I guess it hasn't been addressed, because I think everyone who has at some point probably was like, let's just say you had to have a lot of tenacity to do this. And I guess it's like, once I sort of took it on and did the post about it, and with all the drama, it was in a way a bit of fuel to say, like, I'm gonna find a way to at least present something that could be workable if it kills me. And that's sort of what I did.
When it all boils down, I think that the essence of what you want to convey to the public is when the condition upon which your alternative matching is going to be invoked, and that might help people understand the rare exception that this case represents for where you need this alternative matching algorithm to be triggered.
Exactly right. You see, so the first step, which I'm happy about, though, is at least it's bringing more awareness so people can be more careful and not make those mistakes, because inherently, I mean, just like I say, you go to any other market and you'll be in for a nice surprise if you don't realize this just by putting in your orders. And so I do think this is something worth looking more into from that standpoint, and at least being aware of it, at least. But that said, if this can become some sort of a possible solution, that'd be great. But there is that issue that I'm not sure about. Can this be gamed, by leaving that flag out? Because technically you can't force a bot or a GUI to put all of those in. So, like, I'm not convinced. Like I said, it just needs more testing. I don't want to be, again, every time you try and say, like, oh yeah, I got it all figured out, that's the first step to getting smacked on the head. And I've tried not to be that way, and I still keep getting smacked on the head. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, when I was reading the chat that where all this stuff happened, it was more, I think, that people read it a certain way, and you can't really convey, like, I can kind of tell you something vocally and mean two different things, right, by the way I say it. But you don't really get that distinction whenever you're writing text. And when some of the people, I think, read the initial post that you made, they thought, oh my god, this is, gloom and doom scare tactics for some reason. What's the motive? I don't think that they really realized at the time that you were just bumping your head against it. And I think it's possible that like I said before, we haven't had all this funding that we have now for, for very long compared to how long we've gone as, on bare bones. There was a time when BitShares was at 8 million. So our funding for a long time was kind of, at a place where we were working and operating on bare bones. So now we're in a place where we can start looking at things and digging deeper and having people like you doing this stuff. But I would also urge you to consider bringing this stuff up as a worker proposal for all the stuff that you've done. Show what you've done thus far and maybe get paid for it after the fact if people like it, or, however you feel is important, because in the end, if people are fixing these types of things, I would hate for them to feel like they're not part of BitShares after they're doing this stuff and helping fix it. If it does seem like you are fixing it, if you do end up fixing it, I think this is something that's very valuable for us to pay, right? And if you have stake, it's also voting stake. Not only
one thing I think that I suspect that you've probably learned a lot from this whole thing. Like Fuzzy was saying, some people looked at it as a very sensationalist and fear-mongering kind of way you presented it, and you also, I think, realize now that what you say in these types of for problems like this can have a major impact on people's perceptions of the market and actually shift the market. So caution is definitely advised when it comes to challenging the status quo in terms of how orders are matched and things of that nature, because that's the core of what this thing is. We're a decentralized exchange, and when you realize that you can actually impact the market because we have a small market with what you say, that's an important lesson to learn, and I think you've learned that, correct?
Well, I mean, as far as affecting the market, I don't necessarily think it caused any real issue. And again, this is not even something that was new. People were aware of this, but I mean, I guess I'm also coming from a different standpoint. I mean, I've been trading markets for decades at this point, and bringing up issues like this, if anything, it's like the first thing you want to do is let people aware. It's sort of like the being at the poker table. If you don't know who the sucker is, kind of thing, it's probably you, and you need to at least be aware of how the game is played and what the pitfalls are. So it doesn't even necessarily say anything about the system so much. But people are more worried about what they don't understand than just adjusting for what's there. And like even like I wrote in the post, which I don't know if most people even got that far. I said, New York Stock Exchange, Chicago Board of Trade. I mean, these are world-class exchanges that trade trillions of dollars, in periods of time, and sometimes they go down for a day even, and so you just have to be aware that can happen, have backups. So to say that bringing up an issue, it's one thing to just sort of rip something apart with just for whatever reason, and people do it for everything anyway. That doesn't necessarily, the question is there validity to it? Is it bringing up valid issues or not? You see, so that's what it is. If there's no substantiation, it's all made up crap. That's one thing. But in the end, to bring up valid issues and make people aware of it, I think only it's just like any stock or anything else. I mean, the foolish will be the ones selling at the bottom, and then if anything, then it'll give a chance for the strong hands to come in and keep their cool head on and buy into it and watch it go to the next level. And all those stupid people will be like, "Whoa, I'm just the idiot following around," So in the end, I don't think that fear. There's always going to be something short term that comes in. Rightly or wrongly, and to worry or think about that is, to be too concerned that it's going to happen one way or the other. You can't even control that, I think. But yeah, I think you all know that wasn't the intention here. It was more just to let people know, like I've done for so many other things over the years, in whether it's the Chicago Board of Trade, New York Stock Exchange, the way the market makers work, or you name it.
Well, I'll say this. You have a lot of experience in this stuff, so I won't deny that these institutions and the people, the trading interfaces that work with them, they're spending a lot of money making sure that those trading interfaces are the best they possibly can be, and making sure that the user experience is such that there are no mistakes that can be easily put on them, right? So I'm sure they spend quite a bit of money in this, and any insight that you bring to it I think is valuable. I will say, though, that we also have something called BSIPs, BitShares Improvement Proposals. These things can be funded. And if you drew it up and you draw it up well, like with all the documentation on how which you are already essentially doing as we speak, and you compile it and put it out as a BSIP, maybe you can get funding to do this. And that's kind of one of the main goals of these Hangouts, is to make sure that people know that they can join up and be heard with, value propositions they would like to bring to the chain. So we can then bring it to people. Myself, I can vote with a pretty decent stake, but have other people who want to upvote these proposals and pay to have our chain improved and the experience for people improved, because that's one of the very powerful things that user value propositions that BitShares offers that a lot of chains do not offer, right? So I will say keep it up. Please keep us updated on it, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about it this week. But I think this is so big of a thing that if people listen to you as you progress, it'll kind of sink in more and more what exactly is going on if they don't understand it. And I would also urge everybody to go read Alex P. Morris on steemit.com, where he posts a lot of this stuff, so you can also kind of get that input while you're ruminating, as Thomas said earlier on it.
Yeah, I haven't even had a chance. Sorry, I haven't even had a chance to post since I got it. This again, it's just been so consuming. I mean, but, that's the other thing too. Like, I'm like I said, I just started messing with this code, and I know you kind of talk about these workflows, but it probably at this point, I sort of laid out a possible path. I think I'd actually prefer if someone else who's familiar with the code for years tries to, if they want to put a worker proposal or something, let them take it on at this point and take their knowledge, because again, I'm not so familiar with this code base. Just setting it up, I probably spent more time just setting the whole thing up in a way I could work with it. I think I know what Dan is doing. I think which is probably why I was having more trouble. I think he's actually doing this all in on a Mac and Xcode or something, and maybe that's a much better sort of work environment, but than I've been using also. So a better tool chain, I mean.
Thomas, you said something? I didn't get to hear that.
I've forgotten what I was just saying. This is a minor comment, but I'm ready to move on if we've exhausted this thing.
Sure. Real quick, Alex, if people want to contact you about this and they want to work with you in any way, shape, or form, how is the best way of reaching you?
Well, I'm our same name on Discord, on Steemit, even on GitHub. So yeah, they can just reach out that way.
And that is the classical spelling, Alex P. Morris, all one word.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for signing up. Looks like you guys are all earning a little bit just from signing up. Talkinator is going to be talking a little bit about. He has 3 different issues that he posted about. So what I'll ask you, Talkinator, is if you could start with the first one, which is the BitShares depot system, and then go into GUI worker proposal update and the documentation third.
I think we lost Talkinator.
Okay. Well, I can cover this a little bit, and I think most of us can cover this stuff. So I'll go ahead and I'll start doing so right now. Voting in BitShares depot system. He had 4 questions, and he says, "What can stakeholders vote on?" Well, first let's go and say in the BitShares delegated proof of stake system, it's an altered proof of stake ecosystem where you actually can use your stake to give each token is a vote in the ecosystem. Now, I can vote directly with them, or I can delegate those votes to other people. And I can also use those votes to delegate the, block production. Well, it's not necessary. Well, block production for the sake of this, for the sake of most people here, who the block producers will be in the ecosystem for whatever chain runs it, right? So there are witnesses. Some call them delegates from the older days of BitShares, but these are generally used together. I mean, interchangeably. And those are the block producers on the network. Now, with that said, stakeholders can vote on witnesses, committee members, and worker proposals. We have talked a little bit about witnesses. Committee members, they get to change or set up, propose changes for things in the network, but they can also, I believe in BitShares, they change the fees and little things like that based on what the market cap and the individual price of BitShares is. Some of the bit assets are controlled as well by the committee, but that is not always the case. And then we have worker proposals like we've got into a little bit today, earlier with Alex. And worker proposals are just that. BitShares was the first chain that actually hired developers based on votes from the blockchain itself. So for those who might consider BitShares centralized, it's really anybody who has a vote, who has BitShares, has a vote. And the amount of BitShares they're willing to risk holding really determines how much they can vote in the ecosystem. Does anybody feel like I need to cover that part more?
I think you did a pretty good job with that. I got a semi-related question. Did we talk about vote decay earlier? I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I just was curious whether that's been discussed this morning.
No, we haven't talked about it this week, but vote decay, for those who are listening and are unaware of it, it's the idea that I can vote today and my vote, the power of my vote will slowly decay, and I will have to actually kind of like go back and re-upvote to bring it back to a full power vote. Is that pretty much fair?
Yeah, it's the whole idea that you know, if people die and don't pass their information about their involvement with the blockchain onto their siblings or inheritance, then that sticks, that voting power in that where they have said they wanted to do for or against various things stays forever. And we need a way to get rid of that because people do die. This has been described very well on the network if you've been tracking it all, and it's something that I originally, back in the day, I mean, this is not a new issue. We've talked about this idea for a while. Yep. And originally I was opposed to it, but I'm very much in favor of it now. I think it's been talked about a lot more further lately than it was earlier, and I really think that we need this to equalize, because it doesn't, I mean, you still have as much voting power as your stake provides initially and for some period of time. There are two parameters that the voting decay idea needs to have, and one of them is how long does your voting power stay 100% active, like for 6 months, and then at what rate after that period does it start to decay. And so there's been a number of people that say it should decay over 3 months, others over a period of a year, and that's all needs to be discussed to decide what the best way to do that is. But I really think that the idea needs to be implemented myself.
I tend to agree. I think that it's a very valuable one for multiple reasons, not just in the case of somebody passing away or losing their keys or anything that might inhibit them from being able to change their votes in the future or take them back, or
it really impacts the whole idea of voter apathy. There's no question in my mind, and being involved with this ecosystem for a couple of years now, that the voter apathy, I mean, we have a nice democratic, decentralized way of governance. But what we're discovering, especially with worker proposals, is that there are people that are not active. Even the proxies are probably not as active as they need to be and tuned in for what needs to happen. They don't have this problem in the Dash masternode system. I'm not sure why, but they don't. Probably because people have more of a vested stake in it. But the point is that if we don't have a way of addressing this voter apathy, our governance has a flaw, and we need to fix that flaw.
Well, I think one of the ways that it's been addressed in some ways is that we have, well, one of the ways that we should address it is to actually reward people for upvoting. You know, having elections almost might not even be a bad idea, where, you know, certain people, like for instance committee members and things like that, they have to be reelected, or, you know, workers maybe even need reelected over time, and you need to continue that type of stuff for certain kinds of workers. You know, maybe you have a maintenance worker that is indefinite. They have to always be here. They have to be on call essentially whenever something happens, that type of person.
Custom Miner actually brought up a good point in the chat here. He says that if you incentivize voting, that you actually can create a gaming system or a way that can hurt. So I think that the decay, even though it's a negative kind of aspect, I think if that's designed properly, I think you can get rid of that propensity of gaming the system, because it will be automatic for one thing. Whereas if you incentivize it, then you're leaving it up to the hands of the individuals. And so I'm not in favor of a incentive program for the voting issue myself, but that's just my take.
Well, I'll say this: what Steam has shown is that they have no voter apathy problems, because of this gamification kind of aspect. You reward those who upvote things and keep up with them. And now, obviously, BitShares is a slightly different ecosystem, but I believe that dynamic will still play out very similarly. Might, you know, refract because of the light in different ways, but and might give us a slightly different image. But I think it'll still be like what you were saying with Custom Miner. The gamification of that type of stuff is very powerful, and you need it to be a dynamic system that forces people to, or incentivizes people to want to do something, to change their behavior, to actually not have that apathy. I mean, imagine if voting every 3 months on something actually gave you a chance to enter a lottery where you could win 1 million BitShares, right? Something like that could be a very cheap way of us incentivizing.
Yep, I agree with that. A lottery kind of equalizes it out. I agree. That would be a good way to do it if you're going to provide an incentive.
Yeah, so I'm just throwing out ideas that, of course, you know, we could go in that direction, but I do think that you guys bring up some dang good points. I'll say, please post these guys. Please post them, because the more people, I mean, I've got the whale tank over there that's got a bunch of RSVPs, and it's a different thing altogether, but I want to see, I'm trying to get these people who are talking and bringing up these issues, I want you guys to get paid. So when you guys are thinking about these things throughout the week, or you think something valuable that the BitShares community should know about, post it to this RSVP thread so we can upvote you and so we can cover it, right? Because these are great ideas, and it's a great off-topic, side topic to this. It would actually fit really well on this RSVP thread where I think people are going to get paid a decent bit just to post to it, right? So with that said, do you guys feel like we can go on to the next point that Talkinator brought up?
Hey there, could I just chime in very quickly?
Oh, well, you're here, so you should probably chime in the entire time.
Thanks. I think just in voter apathy, in my mind, I think there's just possibly two categories. There are people who just don't care at all. So that's one category. And I think the second category is people who do care, but perhaps vote once and then just drift off. Maybe they assigned their votes to a particular proxy and they drift off and don't pay any attention anymore. And I think that second category is in my opinion, the people that would be good to target with this decaying voting.
Yeah, I think that you would target them because I see like proxy systems becoming more valuable where people would actually like go around being like, "Oh my god, please let me be your proxy if I can get a cut of what you were going to earn from voting anyway." You know, I think if we could do those things, we can incentivize them to find proxies that they trust, and then even
Right.
make it so there's a almost like a market where they can see how much they can trust proxies. There's so many things we could do, but I also think we might need iterations of chains in some ways, but we won't get into that today. But real quick, you do have GUI worker proposal that you were talking about that's still up for a vote, and documentation of BitShares. Would you like to cover those points here in about 5 or 6 minutes?
Sure. Regarding the GUI worker that is being headed by Bill Butler, that is still out there, up for vote, and everybody who's a stakeholder can go and review that proposal. And also, if they choose to vote, they can do so in their wallet, and to vote positively or to not vote in a way to perhaps abstain or vote against it, depending on your choice. And that is valid through the 14th of this month. So if you have a vote, please go ahead and vote and or assign your vote for a proxy.
One thing I want to add to that is, just in case, is if you're a shareholder that uses a proxy and you recognize that your proxy is not voting the way you want them to for this particular issue, then you can withdraw your proxy vote and vote yourself directly, and then later on put your proxy back in if that should be the case. So if you're aware of the issue and you don't like the way your proxy is voting, don't just blindly switch your vote proxy to somebody else or take it away altogether for indefinitely. Just look, it's a temporary thing. You have instantaneous control of who you're voting for. So if you want to remove that power just momentarily to vote for this worker proposal, you can do that.
That's a good point. And you can actually go and see what proxies are doing by checking out cryptofresh.com under their accounts, or you can go to BitShares Talk, where they often talk about stuff that proposals and such. They'll give their thoughts on the worker proposals and different things that are being posted up for vote by the community. So just another little tidbit. Okay, now with that said, where are we, Taco? Do you have anything else you would like to state? Because
sure. If we can move on then maybe to just talking about documentation.
I would love it. Don't we all love talking about documentation all the time?
Absolutely. So this was actually a topic which was also raised by Virtual Growth last week. And the topic of documentation is oriented to for different audiences and what they might be interested in seeing. This includes anywhere from documentation to end users who are perhaps using one wallet or another, and they want to know how to do transfers, how to purchase an asset. So that's one type of documentation for end users. Then there can also be documentation for businesses and vendors. There's a third category of documentation, which can be for exchanges. And then a fourth type of documentation that could be for developers who are new to BitShares and or graphene in general. And so I think those are the types of documentations that might be of interest to different users. And then there's the question about how to possibly fund that documentation. And this ranges anywhere from worker proposals on the BitShares system to private companies or organizations to crowdfunding. And this kind of touches on something that we've touched on. And possibly bounties. So people are saying, you know what, I really want good documentation about how to create a user issue asset. I'm willing to put in, I don't know, 5 BitUSD if somebody's willing to prepare that. So I think those different audiences is of interest, and I think how people might want to fund it is also something worth thinking about.
That's I didn't really realize this until now, until you just said that thing about bounties, because that was what a very primary effort of how the early days of BitShares things were funded, was through bounties. And a Bytemaster offered bounties for lots of different projects, and that's a crowdfunding kind of approach to getting around some of these bottlenecks that we may be having experiencing in the worker proposal system, where we have to have a vote threshold before anything gets accepted. But if enough people get together and decide, hey, we are so much in favor of this particular work that we will fund it ourselves directly, then that's another alternative way that it can get done outside of shareholders funding it.
Yeah.
I'll
and
say this.
BitShares has some functionality that kind of is ready and suitable for that too.
Exactly.
Sorry,
we have escrow capabilities. We have multi-sig. There are many different ways that we can put together an ad hoc kind of crowdfunding effort for things that we need to get done.
Yeah, I'll say that for things that are absolutely necessary, I'm not personally against it, but I will say this. When we have all of this funding that's just there ready.
I hear you, Fuzzy, but the reality of the situation is we have a big divide in our cultures with regard to the people that have the biggest voting stake, and that's we're seeing. This UI proposal is a perfect example of that. I mean, you were there yesterday. You saw how much in favor of the UI proposal, Bill Butler's proposal, there was in that chat, and yet we still haven't been able to cross that threshold yet, and I'm optimistic we will. But it's a major uphill battle to get to get worker proposals for a lot of things paid for that we believe should be. Marketing and user interface is another. Now, maybe if Bill rewrote his thing to address the issue of the open-endedness that was the biggest complaint, that might resolve this problem. But it's not clear to me that it will, because we've seen this resistance from other people. One of the Alt was one of the guys who's just adamantly opposed to any kind of expenditures from the reserve pool at all. And so I think he's not alone in that, but I think he is a minority in that.
I'll say here's my thinking on it. We have the ability to do some really cool stuff. I think that the vote tokens that we have, well, they've proven themselves already. I've already built so much ridiculous. I've paid to have this stuff built with these tokens.
Yeah, you paid for it.
Yeah, I did. And I could have sold them and all that stuff, right? But that's.
Well, my point was that it wasn't paid for out of the reserve fund. You did that's all on your own initiative, which is a good thing. It's more or less like the bounty thing.
Yes, but the question is it a good thing when your vote is actually the token? So the people who care about it most are going to look at it more as a vote as opposed to a token to sell, right? Obviously, some are going to see it as both, and they're going to utilize that pretty well to their own benefit, which is fine. But the point that I'm bringing up is maybe we can reach out to Abit, because I know that he has a crap ton of Steam power, and create a token for workers, and maybe get people to help with the documentation and post it to the blockchain. Create this synergy and show the Steam ecosystem that there is synergy there, because a lot of people I don't think see it. It's easy to become extremely tribal. Trust me, I know. But I think that if we can show that these things get done, and like I've already been able to do, maybe we can, if everybody here or a number of you reach out to Abit and say, hey, why don't you see about delegating some Steam power to a token for the BitShares workers, so people can show what they're doing and then maybe get a worker to pay for it afterwards. So we don't have to worry about that, because one of the biggest things that people are concerned about is, and rightfully so, is people taking the money and running. Even if there's escrow, somebody might not finish the job and take their last payment. There's always things that can happen, right? So this kind of lubricates those ball bearings so we can get moving so the wheel gets moving more, and I think a multi-spectrum approach is a great one. Now, with that said, do you guys mind if I really quick cover the last topic that I'd like to bring up?
Sure.
And sorry to like move it forward so fast, but we've only got a couple minutes. And it's along these lines, and I don't know, what everybody's going to think about it, but I think it's important that maybe we all sit and think about it for this next week. BitShares does have a cultural divide in ways, and it's mostly around money and how it should be spent and how much of it should be spent for certain things. And I'd say that the one thing to me that brings them all together is the idea of getting new tokens. I don't think anybody in our community would be upset if a project came and said, hey, we would like to have $1 million worth of BitShares, and in return, we are going to list our token on BitShares first. If we reach our milestone, we will give you guys 15% share drop. And all we want is a worker that pays for us to be able to build. And if we need something changed in BitShares, we'll put together a BSIP for it and all these things so we can get it done because we have a need for it. We have an incentive, a really powerful incentive now to make sure that these things will work, right? We will handle that stuff as well. And they promote these things. Don't you think that the community would say, if we can get a share drop for 1 million BTS, all of our BTS are going to go up because we know what happens when a share drop happens. It gets all of the value of that token that's going to be share dropped for the period of time that that token can be a target, right? So if we were to do something like that and create a cycle where every time people get on to our Hangouts, they hear us talking about this next project that's doing this, I suspect that you guys would see BitShares go up significantly. And we have everything for us to be able to do it. And I don't think that it would be something that would be that politically problematic if we could make sure that these projects are legitimate. Now, do you guys have any thoughts on this for maybe 90 seconds? Because I will tell you guys what I think. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I obviously think it's a good idea. I think it's something that if there were new if there were new tokens share dropped onto a token and you see it consistently over time, people would realize that BitShares is now a share drop token. Other people who would want to get our attention would want to share drop on that token. So this is the same thing that I approached Ned about with Whale Tank and the idea of all these whales making tokens that they would then give to chains that share drop on Steam Power. I promise you, when one of these chains starts becoming a share drop target, their minds are going to be blown with how expensive that chain becomes. It's going to become like, what's Warren Buffett's fund? Where each share is like 1,000, 100,000. That's the type of stuff that these things can become. Berkshire Hathaway, yeah, thank you. And that's what we can become, like the top shelf, where everybody says, this is an exchange. We'll get listed. Maybe we even come up with, work a proposal that says, you guys will get listed free. You'll get added to block trades free. Because we'll pay all of that, but you guys need to share drop at least 10% on our token. Now we're hedging our bets, even if something comes on that sounds like it might be a better value proposition for us someday. We're still going to be able to own other tokens just by passively holding. And with that said, that's what most people want, to earn profits from passively holding. And I'll just go ahead and I'll end it with that this week. And we'll see you guys next week. But I will say thank you for everybody who RSVPs. You will all receive an amount of Beyond Bits based on what our upvote is on the Steem It thread. So I urge you all to consider reaching out to people that you know have a stake in Steem and also a stake in BitShares to upvote these threads and to help to pay us, because I use these to build tools for us to grow and expand. And I'm looking forward to us continuing to grow and expand. And with that said, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.